Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of The County Seat. As this year comes to an end and we roll into 2016, one of Utah's premier departments that has received a lot of attention in the general press and on our show, the School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration, is going through a change. Director Kevin Carter, who's been at the helm for almost a decade and a half, is making his move to retirement. So today that will be the topic of our conversation as we talk with the outgoing director, Kevin Carter, and the incoming director, David Ure, on the show. Gentlemen, thank you for taking the time to join us today on the County Seat.
Thanks, Chad.
I would like to start because, you know, our first program on Sitla was 5 years ago on the County Seat, and we've done 2 or 3 shows since. And it surprises me to this day how people are misunderstand the mission and and how the system functions. So I would like to start with the question of exactly how you go from taking a section of land that belongs to Sitla and how you turn that into dollars in schools and make that connection. And I'll just toss that over and see what kind of an answer we come up with.
Sure. I think I'm going to set the foundation to that answer by going back a little further in history and reestablishing our understanding of how we got these lands to begin with. So beginning clear back after the original 13 colonies formed a union, they realized that they had this whole continent that someday was going to be populated and there were going to be states. And so they decided that they wanted these territories that would become states to have a number of public institutions like public education, higher education, in some cases reform schools and schools for blind children and deaf children. And so Congress had all these laudable goals that they wanted the new states to have as they came into the Union. But then, just like now, they didn't have the money to do all the things they wanted to do. But one thing they had was land. And so when each of these new states came into the Union, beginning with Ohio in 1803, Congress made a land grant to the states as they came in to help fund certain public institutions, primarily public education. So when Ohio came into the Union, Congress granted them 1/36th of all the land in the state, one section out of 36, to help fund public education. And so this was the beginning of the land grant system. Well, as civilization advanced westward, it became clear that not all of America was as verdant as the Ohio Valley, and that one section out of 36 was going to be insufficient to provide any kind of a funding mechanism. Congress concluded to give more land. And so in about the 1850s, as states came in, Congress granted 2/36 or 1/18 of all of the land base in the state to the nascent states as they came into the Union to generate money for their school system. Well, by the time they got to the Great Basin and Utah was finally granted statehood in 1896, they looked around and said, oh my gosh, this place is really dry. And so they granted 4 sections, or 1/9 of all of the land in Utah was granted at statehood to help fund public education. And that was the beginning of the school grant in Utah. And so if you look at a state ownership map, you can see little teeny blue speckles all over the state, and those are the lands that were granted to us at statehood to help generate money for public education. And there's a number of different ways that we use these lands to generate money. One of the most effective ways, of course, is to sell the land and just convert it into private ownership for cash. And about half of all of the land that we were granted was sold in the first 20 or 30 years after statehood. And even though the land was sold for maybe $1.50 an acre, not a lot of money, all of that money of the sale proceeds were put into a permanent bank account. And it wasn't spent, only the interest from that bank account was spent. Well, it didn't put a lot of money in that bank account. By the time I started with managing trust lands in 1981, there was about $18 million is all that they had socked away in that 90-year period, which wasn't going to turn out a lot of money for schools. But one thing that you need to keep in mind is that it did put a lot of money on a lot of land on the tax rolls. And right now, 1/3 of all of the private land in Utah were once trust lands. So that's a big number. That's a lot of land that's in private ownership, that's generating property taxes, that's funding the school system. So in the 80s and 90s, the permanent fund grew slowly. About the mid-90s, it was about $50 million was what was in there. Regrettably, it was the lowest permanent fund of all of the trust land states in the West. Utah had not done a creditable job of managing its trust lands or its permanent school fund. And about that time, the public school beneficiaries looked around and said, this is an incredible asset. This should be doing something to help schools, and it's not. And their perspective was that almost everybody else in the state got some kind of preference for using these lands except schools. And it was true. It was just regrettable how badly the lands were being managed for other things instead of for the school system. And so the public school folks put together an education program, which is what they do, so they did it well. And they educated the legislature and a bunch of other folks on how these lands should be managed to generate revenue for the schools. And in 1994, they prevailed upon the legislature to change the statute. They created SITLA, the School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration. They pulled us out of state government for the most part. So even though I'm a public figure and a public entity, I do not work for the governor. And if I make a decision to generate revenue for the schools that's not politically popular, they can't fire me because of that.
I believe I've recalled that coming up over the
That's
last
happened,
few
yes.
years.
Yes, that's happened in the past. Yeah. And so that happens. Sometimes I make a decision which I think is in the best interest of the beneficiaries, which is not the most political decision. But the outcome has been this. When I started as director in 2003, the permanent fund was about $330 million, and today it's $2.3 billion. So, we've generated roughly $2 billion in the 13 years that I've served as director. And so I think the model works. And we have been able to turn this around, and now our permanent fund is in the top third of all of the trust land states instead of being dead last. And so, head to head with our peers, we've done a better job over the last decade and a half. The money goes into a permanent trust fund, like I mentioned. And the reason that it does that is so that not just today's school children, but tomorrow's school children also receive a benefit from this money.
So when you generate money through leases or sales or other things that you do as the administrative body over SITLA, that money is put in for investment, and the schools withdraw the return on the investment only, not the base fund. Is that correct?
Essentially, yep. Essentially, that's the model. And so all the money that we take in the door, we give to another entity that invests the money. The interest and dividends that come off of that investment get distributed each year to each individual schools. It doesn't go through the legislature for appropriation into the Uniform School Fund like most of the money goes. Instead, every school in Utah has a community council. And this community council is composed of a couple of teachers, some parents, and the principal. And they sit down every year and they decide what's the most critical unmet need that we have in our school. Is it a computer lab? Is it tutors for English as a second language? What are we not doing with our standard appropriation? And they put together a plan to meet that need, and these monies are what go to fund those plans. And it's the only discretionary money a school gets Therefore, even though it's not billions of dollars, they're precious dollars.
Very good. We're going to take this point to take a break. We'll be right back here on the county seat. We're talking about the school institutional trust lands. We'll be back in just a minute.
The Utah Farm Bureau has always been there to fight for the needs of its members. With discount programs on items ranging from vehicles and ATVs to health and wellness. The membership fees aren't big, but the results are. We've been around since 1916, and we're not leaving anytime soon. Utah Farm Bureau. We work for those who work to feed the world.
Kanab, base camp for your southern Utah adventures. You belong in Kanab.
There is a place where the desert comes alive, where rain breaks forth from solid stone and gardens spring from blistered rock. There is a place with enough color to make a rainbow jealous, where boulders are bigger than buildings and cliffs are higher than clouds. There is a place that will straighten your step, tighten your grip, widen your eyes, and open your jaw. There is a place.
How would you like a menu with over 400 fine dining options? Then come to Davis County, where dining goes beyond ordinary takeout. With over 400 restaurants, the possibilities for a special holiday dining experience are endless. From sautéed ribeye or authentic sushi to gourmet sandwiches and salads, it's the perfect time to escape the kitchen. See a complete list of dining options by visiting playindavis.com and plan your next night out.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking about the school institutional trust lands with the outgoing director, the incoming director. Kevin, you've had most of the stage so far, but I do want to throw one thing out that I continually hear as I make my way around the state. And that's about basically the concept of inholdings. You've got that checkerboard parcel, and there has been a tendency to do land swaps with the federal government to aggregate those and trade unusable stuff for usable stuff. Bowtie Arch comes to mind as a recent land swap that took forever to do. But some people say that if you take those parcels out, then you no longer are able to maintain the ability to affect federal land management, make sure you've got transportation corridors, and so they're opposed to it. The other side of the argument is obviously you can do more with a big parcel of land. So what's your take on this?
I mentioned that we've increased the amount in the permanent fund by $2 billion. Much of that came because we were able to consolidate our lands into blocks in areas where there were valuable resources that we could extract. The flip side of that argument, like you've said, is that having our land scattered throughout the federal domain as inholdings in a wilderness study area, for example, that perhaps that gives us some kind of leverage to affect federal land management policy. Our experience has been having those scattered sections hasn't been much of an advantage. President Clinton created the Grand Staircase, captured 200,000 acres of school trust lands, didn't bat an eye. Didn't even give it a consideration that he was capturing that land. We took advantage of an opportunity there to bring it to his attention and the administration that they had saddled the school children with this big recreation monument that they'd created, and we were able to exchange out of that into better areas. But I guess my point is the scattered nature of these lands hasn't helped us much in affecting federal policy. What we do whenever we trade out of those areas is that we work with the counties and we make sure that any roads that they have that cross our lands are secured before we convey them to the federal government so that the access issue is addressed. You know, we do take care of that. We do check that box before we convey lands out of our ownership. But as far as preventing the federal government from taking actions, we haven't been much of a effective deterrent exactly for that. Matter of fact, sometimes it seems like they gleefully do it to capture our lands, but yeah.
You've been on the board. What have you noticed in your time as you've led up to, coming to the directorship that has been a big issue for SITLA?
Well, let me say this, that when I was on the board, I thought I knew the answers to all the questions. And now that I'm walking behind Kevin, I know as a board member, we didn't know half what we thought we did. So any board members listening right now, I'm not trying to insult you, I'm just trying to tell you what reality is. I guess a prime example of this, when we start talking about working with the federal government, as Kevin just brought up, is a meeting just we had this week with the BLM back in Washington. And to me, it seemed very easy to make decisions back there, but it appeared that no one wants to make a decision. And I believe that the in-holdings are really kind of a detriment to us right now, just because we can't get decisions about crossing land or trading back and forth unless it takes 2 or 3 or 4 years. And we don't have that kind of time really to build this trust fund up. At least I don't think we do. It's not that they can't make a decision, it's that they won't make a decision. And in the conversation we had the other day, it appeared that we're shuffling back and forth between our state director or our acting state director and the people back in Washington. Well, keep in contact, we'll do this or we'll do that. And all it was a shuffle game back and forth. And I'm not one much for patience, as people know, but I did keep my mouth shut that day, and I'm kind of proud of myself. But Kevin has worked with the process long enough that he knows where he can go and where he can't go. And I think that's probably a challenge that I will have as a new director, and also being able to work with the board and knowing what we can and cannot do. Some board members are very interested in maybe taking more challenges than we have in the past. Well, the challenges also have ups and downs, and if you're going to have the ups, then you better be prepared for the downs too. How far do we want to go in actually the development of oil and the gas? Do we want to put more money into it so we receive a greater percentage of the royalty? There's ups and downs to that. And those are some of the things that I, as a new director, I'm trying to work through and listening to Kevin and the advice he gives to me.
Let's get into some of those weeds right after this commercial break. We'll be back with the county seat.
Tucked away just outside of Cedar City, Utah, are 2 of southern Utah's best-kept secrets, Canaraville Falls and Kolob Canyons. The rare scenic views create beautiful backdrops to capture the perfect selfie. Get your selfie to Canaraville Falls or Kolob Canyons and get in on one of Utah's best-kept secrets. Go to visitcedarcity.com and access your adventure.
Have you ever wanted to recreate the world around you? Add some excitement, culture, adventure? Well, there's no need to remake the world when that perfect combination already exists. Just remember 4 words. Welcome to Weber County. In Ogden, you'll find everything you're looking for, from the top of Powder Mountain to the restaurants of our revitalized downtown. Ogden, Utah, mountain to metro and everything in between. Visit Ogden.com.
What would you do with an extra day in Utah Valley? Explore the Wasatch Mountains? Snap a family photo at Bridal Veil Falls. Cool off on Utah Lake or the Provo River. No matter what you're searching for, you can find it in Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking about SITLA today, and this has been a very good conversation. You know, as many times as I've had this discussion with you, Kevin, or people from your staff, I always come away learning a lot more. So this is a very big part of Utah's tax and really our lifestyle. So going forward, we started on challenges. What are the dark clouds on the horizon as far as SITLA goes and for the next few years?
Well, I certainly think actions that the federal government is interested in taking are going to continue to make difficult situations for us. You know, the Waters of the United States rule proposals, Endangered Species Act issues, clean air proposals, just any number, sage grouse, any number of things that the federal government is imposing upon the state make it difficult for us to manage our lands. The other thing that I see as a challenge locally is maintaining our independence from the political process. We need to be careful that we can stay outside of the political process, not get caught up in things that other agencies get caught up in.
Wouldn't your track record indicate that you should stay out of the political process just based on the portfolio when you separated in '94 to where you are today?
Well, I think the bottom line is the bottom line. You know, we had $50 million when we started. We got $2.3 billion now. Staying out of politics earned us $2.3 billion.
What are your thoughts, David?
It's very interesting. The fact is that we have a lot of bosses. Kevin mentioned earlier we have to work with county council, county commissioners and county council people. We have to be very considerate of what their future plans are also. To go down to St. George or wherever it might be and put a development in there and not realize how we're building roads or how we're affecting their schools, that can be as much a great of a detriment to us as anything else, because they then go to the legislature, as Kevin just said us a moment ago, and the legislature is a political animal in itself, and when someone damages some of their constituents, they're looking for blood, and we're the most likely project sometimes. And so we have to be very considerate on how we work with the county commissioners in making sure that we still protect our beneficiaries. We still put money in the kitty for our children, and yet still allow them to govern their own entities, whether it be a city or a county or whatever it might be. Same way with oil development. How do we put oil in the tanks or down the road or in the pipeline and still maintain the atmosphere that some of those county commissioners really want? That will be a challenge that we have forever going down the road, or as long as I'm a director. So.
Yeah, I agree, and I think there's a lot of things that we can do, and we have done. I mean, although our focus is generating money for the schools, we do a lot of things that are conservation-oriented. I've conveyed more lands into conservation or protected status than any wilderness group has done in Utah.
And I've seen how you've done some of that development. Our other show's actually been out on the trail on some of those for At Your Leisure, and I think you've done a really good job at balancing things. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back with a summary and some final thoughts on this. Thank you for sticking with us through the program. We'll be right back.
I let me be me. Oh, you know that who I'm finally free. Ooh, you know that who I let me be me. Oh, you know that who I'm finally free to be me.
There's a little place on a Utah map where I was raised, where my heart's at, where the sagebrush grows wild and high, and the stars come out at night. Oh, there ain't nothing like being raised in the basin with a Ute reservation, skiing starvation, that Duchesne County life.
Shopping in Davis County has never been better. Experience Station Park, Northern Utah's premier gathering place for holiday shopping, dining, and entertainment. With over 100 shops, Station Park is something for the whole family. Or explore the shopping possibilities this season under one roof at the Layton Hills Mall. Both are conveniently located north of downtown Salt Lake, just off I-15. Come take advantage of special discounts and a wide selection of stores. Visit playindavis.com for more info.
There are a couple great things about the Uinta Basin. One is it's still small, it's community.
It makes you feel like when you go somewhere, you know everybody.
Well, you know your neighbor knows you, and you can trust each other. People look out for one another.
I grew up in the Uinta Basin, and I think that it's a good place to raise a family.
So we packed up our 3 kids, and here we came to Uinta County, and what a great place it was.
It's not too big, it's not too small.
And it has a lot to offer that you just don't get in the big city anymore.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are on the wrap-up of our conversation about Sitla, the new director coming in. We were talking on the horizon. Conversations about the test and training range are an issue, the Public Lands Initiative, and what about monuments in Utah? What do you guys see going forward on that?
I hope that my prophecy is not coming to fruition. And the fact is, I believe that our president will give us another monument sometime next year. I don't believe that he understands just how he affects the school kids, but there's also other things taking place that we need to exchange out of. The Utah Testing and Training Range bill that Senator Hatch is trying to put forth right now, I think will do a lot of good for us and do a lot for our national protection. Those are two. Filed it yesterday. Mm-hmm. So it should have a number today that we can follow through with on today.
And then what about the PLI, the Public Lands Initiative?
We just went back to Representative Bishop's office last week, sat with him. He is, I believe, in his final draft. He's going through the red line himself, and he hopes to have something introduced within the next month into the public so that they can start to dissect it themselves, and then he'll start the process of going through the legislature.
He made a promise that he wasn't going to cross any lines if he didn't have everybody completely on board. There's been, you know, has that held true with Sitla as well?
You know, he's always been a solid advocate for Sitla, and we've had the opportunity to work hand in glove with him on this process. And there have been things they've asked for that we've struggled with, that we've resisted at first, but we found a way to provide those things to bring on other constituencies to the bill. So for the most part, we've worked very closely with the congressman and with the Senate on these things, and we think the outcome will be very positive for us.
Is there a problem with our future projections for oil and gas leasing with the soft market?
It hurts. It hurts us a bunch. Yeah, we're probably going to be down $50 million in revenue this year because of oil and gas prices.
So that's $50 million short of going into the trust fund that creates the $50 million you give away to schools each year.
Yeah, that hurts.
That hurts on my goals that I have set out for myself greatly.
Yeah, timing is everything.
Well, hopefully conditions will change. You know, often people on the Wasatch Front don't realize when we go, oh, great, gas is $2 a gallon, that it has impacts elsewhere at other places on the other side of the equation. Yeah. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for inviting us into your homes each week here on the County Seat. A reminder, starting in January, County Seat will be on Saturday nights and Sunday mornings, and you can always watch it again on our website. You can follow us on Facebook. We love your comments, and you can follow our YouTube channel. We'll see you next week on the County Seat. If you like this video, then we invite you to subscribe to our channel, The County Seat. You can do that here. And we invite you to share with your friends. We also invite you to get all the latest up-to-date information by following us on our social media channels. And if all else fails, make sure that you watch The County Seat Sunday morning at 8:30 right here on ABC4.